Celtics Stuff Live.
Celtic Stuff Live, CLNS Radio, the leading online provider of audio and video coverage for Boston sports. I'm your host, Justin Poulin. With me, John Duke. You can follow us on Twitter at CSL_Justin and at CSL_Duke. John, this game today, and I guess we're recording today because it's going to feel a little bit more like a post-game show when it rolls out Monday morning, but I'll tell you, that's 5 straight games and a pair of injuries to, I want to say, key matchups against the Celtics. I don't necessarily want to say that they're key players to Washington or Chicago, but I do want to say that both were strategically very important against the Celtics. And now looks like Morris might not even be able to play in game 2. Certainly we'll find out. This was a quick turnaround game. Wasn't really happy about that. We haven't even had a chance to talk about the Bulls series, which was essentially a sweep after losing the first 2 at home. How you feeling right now? Because it wasn't too long ago I was ready to give up on the entire season. I thought it was over.
Look, they were, things turned around pretty fast, right? I mean, that was, who would have thought, you know, where we were 2 weeks ago, a week ago, we were feeling pretty good. And now, as you said, it's 5 games in, things are rolling. It's kind of a microcosm of today's game. You know, it started off pretty crappy. You know, down 16 zip, down 36-20, not feeling great about things. But it felt like there was a progression, a momentum there that once it started rolling, you felt like eventually they were going to break through. And, you know, you're right. I mean, the injury to Markieff Morris was definitely helpful, just as Rondo's injury was helpful. I will probably, obviously, we don't know a whole lot more other than what happened in game 1. But my own belief is that the Rondo injury, yes, helped the Celtics, but I don't think it changed the result in any meaningful way. And I think probably the same is true with Markieff Morris. I don't think that his presence is going to change any one individual series, but I think it will change, or individual game, but I think it will change individual matchups and how Brad will attack this Washington Wizards team, because without Markieff Morris on the floor, it allowed him to go small and be quite effective, particularly in that second quarter and that run in the second quarter, but in particular in that third quarter when things went pushed way ahead. Really unbelievable efforts there on a number of people's fronts, but you got to tip your hat to Kelly Olynyk. You know, we can talk about Jaylen Brown
reluctantly.
Later on.
Can I say reluctantly?
You know, I get it, but man, he was a beast down there, and he did what he had to do. He took advantage of the opportunity, the situation he had, and really he was I think there's a lot of people to give kudos to for today's game. You got to start with Kelly Olynyk. Not because it was the most important, but it certainly was pivotal in turning the tide of today's game.
Well, they needed somebody to be aggressive. They needed to do something to get a spark because shots weren't falling and he was working it inside and out. And also, Gortat was getting away with a lot of clutching and grabbing early on. I actually think the game, from his standpoint, cleaned up after that first quarter. But early on, he was doing a lot of grabbing for offensive rebounds, etc. And Kelly was doing a little bit of a return serve and pushing. And then I think the officials called, enough fouls to rein it in a little bit. I mean, I think we've seen a lot of ticky-tacky calls in the postseason, not just this game, but in general. Seems like they haven't really let the players really play, and some of the calls are curious, but we'll let that go and just go back to Kelly and say the fact that Kelly really did ignite them, and he played aggressive. I mean, I was just waiting for him to pull Gortat's shoulder out of socket, because they needed to do something. They needed to do something, and Gortat was eating them alive, and Morris was a big part of that. You noted that in the third quarter, things really turned around. They were able to go small, and that was the IT&D lineup with Marcus Smart starting the second half. Amir Johnson really struggling in the postseason to make his mark. Maybe it's matchups or, maybe it's something else. But Gerald Green, given the opportunity to start, really was all part of that, being very slow. I think when they got small and they got aggressive, things definitely really turned the tide. But early in that game, to your point, Kelly Olynyk deserves an enormous amount of kudos for just getting that team righted, getting them back on track. And what is it about this Celtics club that just has to dig a super huge hole to try to climb out of? Because it's almost like they've gotten so good at it, they don't even get nervous when it happens anymore.
I know. It's like they need that,
adversity.
Yes, the chip on their shoulder to grow, 2.5 sizes that day, just like the Grinch. That's what happens. It's like, now things are really at its worst. Now we can go out and just do unbelievably good. They're kind of like the Grinch in that way, I guess. I don't know. I just think, you looked at that, the way that started out. And it's not like they were taking bad shots. They just were missing those shots. They were missing shots that they should make. They were moving the ball. Defensively, the effort wasn't there, but offensively, it certainly was. But I think the difference was bringing Kelly in early they brought him in for Al, and then going and getting Marcus in the game early on. Those two changes, I thought. For Marcus, changing the kind of, as you said, the attack side of things, the aggressiveness, that intensity, I think he turned that, Kelly using his matchup to the Celtics' advantage offensively until people found their way. And it, it didn't take long. Once he started going, then, IT started going, and he hit those 2 threes after the tooth got knocked out. I mean, but none of that happens if Kelly Olynyk doesn't kind of do what everyone has been pleaded with him to do since he got here, which is to be aggressive. Don't double clutch and just go up and be aggressive with his ample skills. And that's why he's such a frustrating player, because you see those games and then you see him, hesitating and playing unsure. He has done it, and I think as you said it last week, where has this Kelly Olynyk been? This is the guy that you want to give almost a max contract to, because he's just done such great work for the Celtics club pretty much regularly here in the postseason.
Yeah, he's been pretty reliable, and the finishing around the rim, even some, I want to call them pseudo alley-oops, but the way that they lob the ball over the defense, and then he's able to finish creatively underneath. I mean, it used to be they would never go down. Now some of those creative finishes are dropping, which is nice to see. And it gives them that inside-out game that they wouldn't ordinarily have. We talk about that 16-0 start for Washington and what a dry spell offensively they were in. And Kelly Olynyk definitely solved that. But defensively was also a huge issue. There was no effort on D, and that's where Marcus Smart comes to play. We look at this next game, game 2, and I called into the CLNS radio post-game show. Bobby Manning was hosting, and we were talking about it, like, what lineup are we going to see from Brad Stevens moving forward? And they asked me what I would do. And I almost think we got to see Jaylen Brown finish some critical minutes in this game. And as much as I would like to say that Marcus Smart should get the start, see what I did there? Marcus Smart should get the start, but at the same time, I'm not sure that it works well. I like having Marcus and Kelly come off the bench to ignite. I like Terry Rozier next to Marcus Smart for a couple of minutes. Brad has a lot of different looks he can throw. I'd almost say you let Jaylen Brown have his Gerald Green moment, and Brad has always had a short hook with Jaylen if he doesn't play well. So if it doesn't work out, it would look very similar to the way that this game started out when Gerald Green just didn't have it. Now, Brad went to Amir Johnson, who still doesn't have it, and then continued to look to Kelly Olynyk and Marcus Smart. But they really solved the defensive intensity issue and then the inability to score issue together. And that was a good substitution pattern. It's amazing they were able to climb out. The other thing that happened that we didn't talk about yet is Isaiah Thomas losing his tooth, because Isaiah is the mother effing tooth. And
I love it.
That's really should be his nickname, right? On literally the day that Paul Pierce's career ends, Isaiah Thomas becomes the mother effing tooth. It just, with an F too. Like I kind of threw it out there on Twitter and nobody was really buying on it, or biting, but he is the tooth. He's the MF and tooth, and then I'm thinking, all right, well, let's just put an F on the end, right? Because that's what it would sound like if he didn't have his tooth. So there we go. He's the MF and tooth. But we have to talk about Paul in a little bit, but it didn't seem to faze Isaiah. The replays of his tooth flying out of his mouth are almost bizarre. Just looking at the expression on his face, like, oh, there it goes. It's weird.
I know what you mean. It really seemed like that was the least of his worries, and I remember to take it back to the truth. There was a game that he played against Phoenix.
Hit the floor hard, and lost his two front teeth, right?
Right. It was bad, and he had double root canal surgery. This was the day that Tommy Heinsohn lost his friggin' mind, and there's an infamous clip. You can find it on YouTube. This is the time. This is Amari Stoudemire's rookie year. They're playing Phoenix, and he sees, I can't remember who it was, and it was it's one of his epic rants. And if you find it, just search Tommy Heinsohn, Phoenix Suns, Celtics. It's like the 2000-2001 season. But anyway, it kind of brought me back to that, oddly enough, because I'm thinking about that, obviously thinking about the truth and everything happening today and what happens, IT loses the tooth. But what we're saying is,
it's just the parallel there, right?
The parallels are huge, and everything that's going on with him right now. I mean, obviously, my God, going to your sister's funeral, flying into Boston at 4 a.m., playing a 1 p.m. game. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, to get 3 points is something, but to do 33 and 9 and, just control the game. I mean, wow. What an impressive effort by that guy. I mean,
he's getting stronger.
Jesus.
That's what's bizarre. It really is. And you know what I think it is too, is this is an incredible team all of a sudden. Just the way that they're lifting each other up, the way that guys are performing. I mean, I think Jay Crowder's quote after the game about Terry and Jalen was that they're getting their chance and they're seizing the moment. And they're getting stronger with every single game. I don't mean just Terry and Jalen. I mean the entire team. Like, they're starting to count on each other. I think the most notable thing when you say 33 and 9 and his ability to not miss a beat and score, and he goes back to the locker room, I mean, we would get scared. We knew that he would come back out and play, but you would be scared to not see Isaiah on the bench and at Brad's disposal in a highly contested game, especially one that started out 16 points down and no scoring, that he wouldn't be able to be called upon if there was a stagnancy in that second unit coming in. And instead, he goes to the bench, then he goes to the locker room. It was like they didn't even miss a beat in their comeback. That is what really stands out. And then on top of it, the fact that Isaiah Thomas has begun to trust his teammates. Instead of doing that Paul Pierce before the big three thing where everybody stands around and waits for him to work his magic, he is now incorporating other players, making some pretty nifty passes, some wraparounds to get out to the wing. He had a nice feed to Amir, but Amir was blocked and unable to finish today. But he is definitely looking to get other people involved. Forget the 33 points. He is not ball hogging. The flow is way better. I know, again, like you said, they had open looks and they didn't knock them down. But the flow of the offense is way better, and it doesn't feel like Isaiah has to carry them, even though he still does.
Well, and that's, I don't want to jump all around the game too much, but I think that, I mean, you're absolutely right. He's getting in the middle of that defense. And there were some times early in the Chicago series where the Chicago D, particularly in games 1 and 2, they were ready for the drive and then the kick out. And they were turning around to IT and they were, looking to pick those passes off. And for whatever reasons in games 3 and 4, it was because it was better movement on the outside of those spotting up or whatever it was. But those passes were there in games 3, 4, and 5 and 6. And so as we saw today, it's so deadly. I mean, not only can IT drive and kick, he can kick out 180 degrees almost. He can find somebody in the corner. He can find someone over his right shoulder. He can find someone over his left shoulder. And, and then they're moving the ball. They're making the 1 pass, the 2 passes, the 3 passes, to find the guy in the corner. Jaylen Brown, when Jaylen Brown comes in the game, hasn't played, dust the moth balls off the kid, throw him in the game. It's only 4th quarter of the second round. What problem? You dust him out there and he gets an open 3 after, a drive, kick, boom. I mean, that's and the fact that they can rely on that kid to do that, or that they are reliant on each other to do that, it all comes from that top guy down. You want to contrast that with what the Clippers did in the 4th quarter of their game. Chris Paul, pound the rock, drive himself, and then get a 15-foot shot that misses the mark. You're not going to win many games that way. Now, I don't care if you're Chris Paul. Isaiah Thomas, who I think most would agree isn't as good of a point guard as Chris Paul, but he's more effective because he's looking to involve his teammates. I'm not saying he's a better point guard than Chris Paul over the long run. Right now, he's playing better than Chris Paul.
Yeah, we knew he was a gifted scorer, but now it's turning out that he's a pretty gifted passer, and that does open up things for like Jay Crowder, who has struggled, and he had a very nice game today. I mean, I know at one point he was 5 for 6 from beyond the arc. I'm looking it up to see. He finished 6 for 8. I mean, 75% 3-point shooting. Fantastic. But he had one of his better games. They really needed him to. Then you look at somebody like Al Horford, 1 rebound shy of a triple-double. I think he has done a nice job of shutting up the critics in this postseason, because he's also only gotten stronger and much more aggressive. His pace of play and his attitude are not the same as they are during the regular season. It's almost like during the regular season, he's trying to just do the right things so that all the teammates stay involved. And it's not that he doesn't still do the right things, but he's patient, he's sort of calm. But he's got a chip on his shoulder now in the postseason. He's getting a little aggressive, getting a little bit more noisy. You can see much more emotion and expression from Al Horford in the postseason. And that's actually the guy that kicked our butts in the first round last year is actually finally now playing for the Celtics. And I don't want to criticize any of his regular season play because I never had a problem with it. I felt like everything was in the flow and, he was being the consummate teammate. But now we're seeing a guy who is finishing a little bit more around the rim. He's excellent at the 5. He's not complaining about playing the 5. And the lineups that have worked for Brad have Crowder at the 4 and him at the 5. And you and I have been talking about that all year long, that's their best look.
Absolutely. And, it hasn't always worked. We talked about why, the size. And interestingly, let's look at that. You look at that closing lineup there of those two guys, IT, Bradley, and who do they go the third guy? They did have Marcus in there, but they end up bringing in Jaylen in. And why? Size. Same reason you had Gerald Green starting games against the Bulls. Size. To have that small forward, have a little bit of size, so you're not going to get beat on the boards every time. I thought that was interesting. But to your other point, though, I think is really, really crucial. So the Wizards go on that run to start the 4th quarter. And, Brad starts bringing the starters back earlier than I think he wanted to. And what struck me is how Al Horford took over that situation. A guy who's been in the playoffs a billion times, who's been there, done it, has been in tough games, knows what needs to be done. And there was a couple times he brought the ball up himself and just said, "Boys, chill, relax. Okay. We're going to slow this down. We're getting out of our heads here a minute. Let's just settle this down and run our game." It was like he was everybody's big brother You know, it was like when your big brother comes out, hey, this is what we're doing here. Just everyone bring it down a notch. And within like one possession of him doing that, IT gets a quick little 15-foot floater, a 15-foot jumper, boom, and then they're kind of back to where they needed to be. Because it didn't happen initially when those starters came in. When IT came in and Crowder came in and those guys, it still was discombobulated.
Yeah, they were fumbling along.
They
were fumbling along, no doubt.
Horford brought it in, and he just brought the temperature in the room way down, and then everything kind of found its level again. Very important. Great game for Al Horford.
Huge game. And I do like him at the 5. What I think is so interesting with Brad Stevens is every time they're sort of getting out-muscled with size, he winds up going smaller and still beating the size disadvantage. It's incredible. And it's, granted, against the Bulls, a lot of it was Gerald Green, but now already in one game into the Wizards series, and it's not Gerald at all. It's Jalen, it's Marcus. So you always get these different looks, but it's funny to me that ultimately the solution for Brad is to go smaller. The other thing I like about that Jalen sub, as you mentioned, going down the stretch in the fourth quarter, is not just the length, but also the switchability. If you really think about every single one of those players, it's really not going to kill them in a switch. Isaiah always could get killed in a switch, but he's even causing more havoc for some of the bigger players when he gets into it. Sometimes Brad just elects to put him on the tallest guy on the court anyway. But that's what Jalen does. It's a little bit different. Not that Marcus can't play bigger, but he plays stronger. Jalen plays quicker. So if they've got to rotate around, that's a huge advantage for them. So I don't know what they'll do to start out game 2. It'll be interesting if he has another wrinkle. There was even a moment in the game where I was like, well, let's get in Jerebko. We need somebody who's going to really crash the boards and still threat a little bit from the outside to drain a big shot. But he's got so many different looks. It's almost like you're watching a college basketball team playing in the NBA, right?
That's great. Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, and that's the way his Butler teams played. And you're right. They bring the scrap, you know, they do. And I think that Marcus Smart probably inhabits that world as well as anybody. His ability, I mean, we haven't talked enough about what he did today and what he's done really throughout this season, but he really turned the Bulls series around. I think he really turned around, this game today. I mean, his presence and what he does out there defensively, it takes everybody out of what they want to do, whether it's Beal or it's Wall or whether it's Butler or, it doesn't matter who it is. He just has a way of making those plays that turn the psychology of the game around. It's not about the numbers of him. It's about the psychology and about what he makes. He makes players make decisions for themselves that maybe aren't in their best interest because he takes away their first option. He is the player equivalent of Bill Belichick. He will take away your first and second option and make you do the third or fourth thing that you really don't want to do, but you have to do to score. That's what he is. He's got that much ability to just turn a player, but then that player's component into the larger picture. I mean, just so freaking impressive what that guy does. You gotta love what he does, and going along with that, I think he was working so hard out there. I don't think he had much left in the fourth quarter. I think that's partly why we saw Jaylen Brown in those closing minutes of the fourth quarter, because he took himself out there at the start of the fourth. He said, I need a break. I think he was so amped up for this game. This is a team he really does not like. Remember, a lot of this stuff with the Wizards started with he and John Wall 2 years ago. Yeah, and some stuff with Randy Whitman, and that was the game. Things started going awry. This has been going on for a while, but he was at the epicenter of a lot of it, which really surprises nobody.
He's a bully. He's a defensive bully, and he gets after it, and he's not afraid to mix it up despite whatever Jimmy Butler says. And Marcus, you're right. A lot of that tension between these two clubs, the supposed rivalry, all came from 2 years ago. And he probably was totally amped up for the game, but I think he's amped up consistently. I like the way he's shooting the rock. Right now, he's hitting some clutch three-pointers, and he's not taking the ill-advised one or the requisite Marcus Smart, it's at the end of the first quarter, I'm going to heave one kind of attempt. He's really playing a little bit more within himself offensively. We don't see him pressing as much as he ordinarily might offensively. And then defensively, I think he's tiring out the opponent. So yeah, he got exhausted. That was a great observation. I missed that, John, but I think you're right. He probably just got tuckered out. At the same time though, the opponents, because of the depth, and I think we'll hit this when we come back from the break, but because the Wizards don't have as much depth, and even the Bulls struggled with depth, definitely at the guard positions, what happened there is he just wore them the heck out. You can't play Jimmy Butler 48 minutes a game, but that's what the Bulls are going to have to do. And ultimately, over the course of a season, he's fighting up against Bradley and he can't find any breathing room. Then he's got to deal with the physicality of Marcus Smart. The not Isaiah, but the other guards and wings are really making the opponents, when they dig in, when the Celtics dig in, making the opponents work so hard. And I think it's going to have the same impact on Wall. I think maybe not so much Beal, but definitely Wall, because he's got the ball in his hands so much. He could get tired out, and they may have to overplay these starters, and I think that's a huge advantage for the Celtics. And just look at how deep Brad has his bench. So to contrast, Marcus Smart gets tired, no big thing, dude. Sit down, relax a little bit. We're going to throw in Jalen. And Washington just doesn't have that luxury. So maybe we could talk a little bit about the benches when we come back from the break. But real quick, going to tell you about Blue Apron and their mission to make incredible home cooking accessible to everyone. Blue Apron knows that when you cook with incredible ingredients, you make incredible meals. So they set the highest quality standards for their community of artisanal suppliers, family-run farms, fisheries, and ranchers. Here's the best part. For less than $10 per meal, Blue Apron delivers seasonal recipes, and it's all pre-portioned, the ingredients, all for you to make delicious home-cooked meals. And you can customize your recipes each week based on your preferences. No weekly commitment. You don't like seafood? Uncheck seafood. You like chicken? Go ahead and check that. You can customize it. You can pass on certain weeks. There's no commitment every single week, like I said. And so if you're going to be traveling, or you're going to go out to eat, or you got family visiting, you just skip a week. It's really easy. Some of the upcoming meals: spinach and fresh mozzarella pizza with olives, bell peppers, and ricotta salata, sweet and sour salmon with bok choy, carrot, and ginger fried rice, Parmesan crusted chicken with creamy fettuccine and roasted broccoli, and baby broccoli and fontina paninis with hard-boiled egg and arugula salad. So check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals for free, and it's with free shipping, so literally no cost to you. And all you have to do is go to blueapron.com/Celtics. You will love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron. So don't wait. That's blueapron.com/Celtics. Blue Apron, a better way to cook. And I know you want to be going to the games because the Celtics are on fire. Maybe at the next game you'll see Isaiah Thomas's tooth fly out. But as the playoffs are just heating right up, the Celtics are in the second round. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to every game. With SeatGeek's seamless mobile experience, you can buy and sell tickets in just 2 taps. SeatGeek helps you find the best seats at the best prices, and it's fully guaranteed. There's nothing like being in the TD Garden for the biggest plays of the year, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. SeatGeek saves you time and money by searching multiple ticket sites to compare prices and find amazing deals. And to get you the most bang for your buck, SeatGeek grades every ticket based on value to help you immediately identify the best seats that are going to fit into your budget. Plus, every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets on SeatGeek with confidence. And it doesn't end with sports. SeatGeek also has plenty of concert, comedy, and theater tickets available too. Best of all, our listeners get a $20 rebate off their first SeatGeek purchase. To get your $20 rebate on tickets, just download the SeatGeek app, go to the settings tab and click add a promo code, and you're going to put ours in there. It's CSL 2017. SeatGeek will then send you $20 after you've made your first ticket purchase. So download the SeatGeek app and enter promo code CSL 2017 today. Okay, John, so with the whole depth thing, it really could catch up to the Wizards, even if Markieff Morris hadn't gotten injured. That's kind of my take. I think that this game would have been more difficult for the Celtics to win if Morris had not had to go out. But I think the Celtics obviously kicked up their play and their energy level too. So I think they might still come away winners. When you look at the final score, it's kind of incredible because the Wizards almost scored 40 points in the first quarter, and they really had a chance to put up another two twice before that ended, but they wind up with only 38 points, and then you look at the final score, and everything dropped off substantially. I don't think we can credit all of that to Markieff Morris, but the Celtics, their depth bench has having its way with the Wizards bench already. That was a huge turning point in the game, as you mentioned, with Kelly Olynyk and Smart, but they just can't hold court. And I think they will get worn down. I know I kind of talked about that already before we went to some of the commercial break and talked about our sponsors, but didn't give you a chance to talk about the depth matchup here because that's a huge edge for the Celtics.
It's a big edge. It allows them to come in, and yes, you've got the timeouts and situations which will lengthen the starters and all that. But I mean, just look at that end of the first quarter, start of the second quarter run, basically where the Celtics couldn't buy a bucket. And I'm not trying to discount that and say, well, it doesn't matter, but let's say the Celtics make just a handful of those shots and the Wizards miss a handful of those shots and it's somewhere close. I mean, not 16 zip. I mean, that when that second unit comes in and you're relying on guys that like Kelly Olynyk and, well, Marcus Smart, I suppose, coming in off the bench there. When you have players like that coming in who can do a lot of things. They can play big, for Smart. If he's got a little guy on him, he can go in the post. If Kelly's got a small guy on him, he can post him up. They got matchups. They can do a lot of different things to kind of switch it up. As opposed to what Washington has, which is, you do have some flexibility with Oubre. You've got, Brandon Jennings, who obviously has played a number of years in this league and knows how to score the basketball pretty well. Jason Smith actually had a pretty nice run there at the end of the third, start of the fourth. But Bogdanović hit a couple of threes, but there's a lot of limitations on all of those players. And unless you keep a couple of your starters in, which they were doing often, it's just such a thin rotation for the Washington Wizards. And I just feel like there's a lot more options that Brad Stevens can throw at the Wizards to kind of throw them off around those end of the first, start of the second quarter, end of the third, start of the fourth. Those bench unit times, I think this is a situation where maybe the Celtics won't be hitting shots like they were today or like they were in Game 6, much of Game 6 against Chicago. But I do think that they have a lot more answers in those stretches than the Wizards do. And so that's a plus right there. If they can weather the storm in the opening minutes of the game and they can take back some of that momentum in those periods there around the quarters, I feel like that's a huge plus for the Celtics. And I think that flexibility, that positional flexibility this team has, is really going to be a problem for Washington as this series progresses. I think maybe the big man rotation today was a little bit thinner because of those injuries, like we talked about. But I think still at the end of the day, this is going to be a game or a series that's decided on the perimeter as opposed to the battle of the last series, which was bigs versus the smalls.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And also, just look at how Scooter Brooks had to manage his timeouts. By the fourth quarter, pretty thin. And that's something, to your point about the depth. Yeah, I call him Scooter. Because he was all upset because Kelly Olynyk pushed. And I'm like, well, if Gortat can grapple, this was kind of my tweet. I was like, listen, Scooter, if Gortat can grab and pull, then Kelly can push. That's just the way it's going to be. But yeah, Scooter Brooks ran right out of timeouts. He didn't know what to do. And I think that's a huge edge when you talk about the different looks that Brad has at his disposal. I think the other real key to the depth too is that the Celtics are healthy, knock on wood, all of that, but they're healthy. I hope you did, because I definitely have a wooden desk in front of me, and it's really important that they stay healthy. But one of the ways you stay healthy is you don't play fatigued. And that's exactly Washington, probably a little exhausted. We're going to talk about the quick turnaround in a second for game one after both Washington and the Celtics went to 6 in their respective first-round series. But healthy and rested. And I just think Brad can manage the minutes. These guys can get a break. And that's how you stay healthy and a little less banged up and more effective in the postseason. It's a huge, huge advantage for them. And when you look at a lot of the pre-series analysis, there were 2 things that stood out. The Celtics had the bench and Washington didn't, but a lot of the pundits said, well, it's just the way it always goes in most series in the NBA. The team with the better player is the one that comes away with the victory. And not in a per game, but in a full series. So here's the thing I wanted to throw at you, just leaping off of that. Do you buy into the fact that John Wall is the best player in the series?
Definitely not. Definitely not. Look, we're going to be completely biased about this. All right. But if I'm casting my MVP votes for the year, right? I'm going to go Westbrook, Harden, Kawhi, LeBron, Isaiah. I'm not giving a vote to John Wall.
Dude, that's not even as homer as
I don't think so.
That's a very fair, and I agree with that. And the other thing is John Wall's defense is no better than Isaiah's right now. And so that's look at LeBron. Look at all the people. I just want to tie it to the people you just threw out there, with maybe the exception of Westbrook. Look at every player you threw out there. Every single one of them has an opportunity or has impacted the game, not only offensively, scoring, distribution, key cog in putting, hey, you can't win if you don't put points on the board. But the truth is LeBron can impact the game defensively and win it. Well, I guess Harden's actually picked up his defense quite a bit, but I think we would have ordinarily said in years past, primarily just an offensive player. Right. But outside of him and Westbrook, but you talk about Kawhi, you talk about LeBron, these are guys that can literally impact the outcome of a game with their defensive effort, and Wall isn't there. And Isaiah, I mean, there's a size limitation, but not always an effort limitation.
I think this is going to be a series that Isaiah is, and we saw it a little bit, I think, in the Chicago series. I think Isaiah is going to play the defense of his life in this playoff run. I really think that he's tired of hearing about how he's such a bad defensive player. And like there was that whole give and take there between he and Bradley, and Bradley's like, I think you're a good defensive player. And
it's like, don't hype me. Don't
hype me, man. I think that's great. Because you're right. I mean, let's sleep on it, guys. Don't realize he's as good as he is, because you're right. He comes into this series and he can just not get back down, and they have to shoot over the top of him. That's the easiest thing, right? I mean, as long as it's not Brad Beal taking 15-foot jumpers over him, that worries me. If it's John Wall not getting past him, but having to take a jumper, I'm good with that. They'll take that any day. I think that there are a lot of matchups that are going to work in Isaiah's favor, taking into account both ends of the court. It has to be a concerted effort on his part to play both sides. And I think we all know there's times this year he has not done that. But
more of the offense he has to carry on his own, the less effort he can give on defense, because he will get tired out. But, to that conversation, I was thinking about this during the game as I was watching it, and I was thinking, here's a guy, to what you said earlier, he doesn't even get in this morning until 4 a.m., he just had to deal with, obviously, more emotions. I can't imagine he's slept all that well. And yet, he comes out and just lays it all out there. I have to say, there's something about the way his conditioning is incredible. His conditioning has got to be, I don't know what he does, but he's got some serious leaping ability for his height. I mean, part of the reason he gets shots off is because he does elevate, and then he gets into the body of, the big man when he's driving into the paint, and then he just waits for the contact. They're a little top heavy, he's compact, and then he can finish and get his shot off. But, he does carry an enormous load offensively, and yet he throws all those points. He can still put some effort on defense, and it's just amazing to me how hard he can play and how much harder he has to play to be, essentially what you said, an MVP candidate. And that's mind blowing to me. I didn't never really thought about it before. And it's obvious he's athletic, but there's a conditioning thing there too that is above average to, way above average.
He's a legitimate freak, I mean, he's got long arms, so he's not as, his arms are longer than he is tall. Not really, but you know what I mean? Proportionally.
It closes the gap, so maybe he's playing
right.
Like he's 6 foot, 6'1".
Exactly. But it's still not, 6'4". And, but you're right. I mean, athletically, first of all, we know he's quick. We know he's quick in short spaces. We know that he can do those things, but the endurance to be able to go fly cross country. I mean, hell, I got on a plane. This is the first time I've flown in forever. I got on a plane for 2 hours. I'm exhausted. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this. You do it a lot more than I do. I can't imagine flying cross country overnight on a red eye and then playing a basketball game, probably one of those basketball games of my life.
I'm with you, but keep
7
in
hours
mind,
later.
He's not flying coach, right? Danny
This is true.
Chartered a private jet. I'm sure he can get his feet up. I bet he can get some sleep. Once you get up to cruising altitude, it's pretty much no bumps and you're smooth sailing. If you're commuting, then you're flying at lower altitudes. Not commuting, but if you're doing more of a regional flight, and I know your 2-hour flight wasn't regional, you were going up and down the East Coast, but typically you're not hitting a lot of bumps. I bet he got to stretch out. I bet he got to take a nap. I'm sure that, it's better than wherever he had the ability to sleep in. I bet it's better than the Marriott hotels I stay in. So, but it does impact his preparation. And even if you put all of that, let's just say, it's like down comforters and the softest bed ever, the best pillows, and he did sleep a hearty 10 hours on the flight back, which I guess the flight wouldn't last that long, but regardless, let's just say he gets good sleep.
Circle, boys.
Right.
Let's send the refueling jets in.
Right. Isaiah's still sleeping. Just sit tight. We'll Top Gun this. So, but let's say all of that. It still doesn't matter because he is, he's going to the funeral of his sister. And so that's gotta take energy, emotional energy. It's gotta be draining. And to your point, it's like for him to shoulder so much of that offensive load, to be traveling, not necessarily, think about this too, preparation. He said after the Game 6 win against the Bulls, he told the team, you guys go do your work, I will do mine. I will be prepared for this game. And he was.
He was huge in this game. I mean, he was just
as great as he's been.
As great as he's been. Yeah. I mean, the fourth quarter, he didn't put up a lot of points in the fourth quarter. Didn't need to.
Right.
He did exactly what you were talking about earlier, which is he distributed. He found other guys. I mean, that's how, Jay Crowder ends up 6 for 8 from 3-point land. And, how Bradley, who really was ice cold for the first two, he did the reverse Bradley in this one, where he was ice cold to start the game. Usually that's his thing. Start the game hot. Ice cold to start and then finished, quite a bit stronger. That's as encouraging a sign as anything, is that he found his level a little bit too, which is really nice to see. But they had help and they were able to, Bradley was able to take that time because Terry Rozier was coming in there and getting solid minutes and Marcus, obviously. I mean,
Terry needs some love too because
yeah, you're right. We got to talk about Terry.
His rebounding and his energy level. And what about that dunk in Game 6 where he elevated? I mean, I like popped out of my seat and was like loud and everybody's like, what? And I'm like, well, did you see that? Did you see that? And, I mean, it is such a nice combination with Smart and Rozier because Smart's a distributor and a defensive hound. And then Terry gets the rebounds from that guard position, a lot like the way Rondo used to. Just elevates, goes up and gets it, comes out of nowhere and knifes through and grabs it. I think he had 8 rebounds in game 1. And the other thing is, he's a shooting guard. He's not meant to handle the ball and initiate the offense. Him and Smart are a great complement to each other coming off the bench, there's no doubt. And Terry, this is the second straight year where he's clearly becoming a playoff stud. He's like Vinny the Microwave. He's always ready when he comes in. He always gives the team meaningful minutes. Brad doesn't necessarily give him a ton, but there's never a playoff game where I can go, when Terry came in the game, I didn't know what he gave them. He gives them a huge lift in energy and athleticism, similar to Smart, but in a very different way.
He is, that's right. He's quickness, he's speed, he's pushed the pace, he's grabbed the rebound. I mean, it's kind of funny. It's kind of like with Kelly Olynyk. You know exactly what you're going to get out of Terry Rozier usually within the first 2 minutes of him being in the game, because either he's a complete mess and he's all over the place, or he's like on it. He's just on it. And in this game, and really since this entire playoff run, he has been on it. He has been focused. He has been driven, and he's finding areas in which the things he does can really help his team. And that's coming back to grab boards, and it's pushing the pace. It's putting another athletic defender to throw at a guy like Wall or Beal. And I mean, man.
Dude,
what more can you say about the guy?
He's an absolute thoroughbred stud, and he just wants to run. I mean, he would love for any game he gets into to just turn into a fast pace, almost like the And One tour, just getting up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And that is a look that they don't get from everybody else. Not to that same level. I know guys like to get out on the break. And I guess maybe one other side note, because I know we won't get a chance to explore it, but the Celtics transition defense after those first 4 minutes was also stellar. And everybody gets on them for not rebounding and whatnot, but that's a lot of it's by design, because even back to the Doc Rivers era, this team always valued transition defense over rebounding. But Terry gives you a little bit of rebounding in that transition defense because of that athleticism. You get a little bit of both worlds that way.
Absolutely. And it allows them, this is a series too where the Celtics are going to do their best to avoid allowing the Wizards to get out and run. Right? Which is really too bad for Terry Rozier. You'd think that would be putting him at a disadvantage because, his speed obviously is he wants to be able to go out and run. But that shows the growth in his game too. In that, while he's always willing to push the pace and go, 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 go. He's like the greyhound. You pull him back on the leash on so much. Right now, he's using his speed appropriately. He's using defensively to get back, to stay on his guys, to close out well. And those are the ways in which he's kind of using his gifts to help the larger cause. And that's, to me, that's a huge thing as the Celtics are kind of going through this series, is if he shows that much poise in his own role. I sent this tweet out the other night. He's shown more at that point, 6 career playoff games, than he had in 164 regular season games combined.
So true. His value is in the postseason.
Oh my gosh.
That's when,
as you said, it's like Vinny the Microwave Johnson. He shows up when the games seem to be their toughest, and that's got a great amount of value. I mean, the other thing I got to be saying as I'm sitting back watching this is, if I'm an NBA, what a better advertisement for the value of the players on my roster than to have them playing in the playoffs and playing well. This is the first time Danny.
When you talk about the off-season tradability of some of these guys, Brad Stevens has given what Danny has done in the past. But again, you want to talk about the best of both worlds. You're got a bunch of young tradable assets. You're trying, back to the Delonte West, Rajon Rondo, Al Jefferson, Kendrick Perkins, Tony Allen, all of those players that they were compiling to be able to trade, yet they weren't winning at the same time. But Brad is a totally different type of coach, and Danny has gotten more astute in his GM capabilities because obviously landing Isaiah in basically a steal of a trade and then being able to recruit Al Horford is huge. And the organization was in a different place before the Big Three era. They got a little bit on the map, even despite the reconstruction of the team. But Brad's got a nice reputation around the league, but they're getting the best of both worlds. Plus they already are jam-packed with a bunch of tradable picks as well. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, but you make a great point. A lot of these guys are getting some run on the biggest stage, and they're obviously, that's one of those intangibles that you can't scout. And watching players come up and play big in big moments, even in limited minutes, is going to raise their stock 100%. You're right about that. Hey, look, we got 10 minutes left. I know there's two things we want to talk about. One is the quick turnaround. So lots of positivity here for game one and a basically, like I said at the top, a sweep of the Bulls if you think about it. 2 games, uncharacteristically poor play. Obviously the Rondo injury is a factor, but they've won 5 straight. But that quick turnaround, curious. We're going to talk about that. And then obviously with Paul Pierce playing his last game on Sunday with the Clippers before retirement, we've got to send Paul off into retirement with a big thank you from you and I. So I am going to be a little negative just because I think the quick turnaround was total BS. There's no way, and I know there's plenty of people that have sounded off about this, but there is no way that the Cleveland Cavaliers, after a 4-game sweep, should have an extra day off over the Celtics and Wizards. It's not even Celtics-centric. Both went 6 games. They should have had the extra time off. This Sunday afternoon matinee, it should have been Cleveland and Toronto. No questions about it. They did not. I don't even understand how they came up with this scheduling.
It's ludicrous. And, not only do the Celtics and the Wizards both done after the whoever will be in that other series has been decided. I mean, put aside for a second where the Cavs are, because they swept their series and everyone would agree that, okay, they should go first, right? But the Raptors knew who they were playing. They were done too early. So I don't understand why you can't take care of both at the same time.
I don't know. Maybe they booked the Rolling Stones at the Q on Sunday afternoon or something, and so it wasn't available. That's the only thing I can think of. We should get an explanation. Really, we should. That somebody must have said Sunday is reserved at the Q. We cannot play a home game in round 1 on Sunday, April 30th, and set it ahead of time, and then the chips just fell where they may. That's the only explanation I could come up with that makes any rational sense, because the NBA if they made this for any other decision, it's silly and it's stupid and it's actually dangerous in my opinion. They've already played 2 hard-fought series. You're giving them, the Celtics, 1 day off, and then they've got to come back and play then on Sunday, and the Cavs have already been resting for a couple of days. The only other conspiracy theory that you could lay on it is just go right out there and be like, well, LeBron and Cleveland had a tough ending to the season. They were beat up. They were tired. LeBron even talked about it. It was pretty obvious. Then they get a 4-game sweep, and so maybe they want Cleveland and LeBron at their best, and so they just give them a couple extra days of rest. I don't know. Could come to bite them in the butt, though. It might set Toronto up for stealing a game 1 on Monday.
It does give Toronto that extra day. And I think all we want to root for is a longer series. Whatever it takes to give Cleveland a longer series is a good thing for Boston or Washington or anybody. So let's just root for whatever it takes to get Toronto, a long lasting, good hard run against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Whatever that takes. So if that extra day helps,
do you say no shot?
Toronto get there?
Do you say no shot for Toronto, or do you think they got a legit shot at going to the Eastern Conference Finals?
I think they have a shot. I think they have a shot.
They
think
played them last year. They've had some experience against them.
That Indiana team was trash. I mean, I love Larry Bird, and I'm really sorry to see that he's walking away, but he knows that they've got some tough choices ahead because they don't have a team around Paul George. And unfortunately for Larry, he wasn't able to get somebody to play with him who could really make a difference. I mean, all those games near the end of the season playing against Indiana, I mean, it's Paul and then nothing else. So it was such an easy series for the Cleveland Cavaliers. The fact they almost lost the first one and lost a couple. I mean, actually the first 3 games
that was the lowest margin of victory for a 4-game sweep in NBA history. So as much as it was a sweep, every single game was closely contested. And to your point, with one supporting actor alongside Paul George, maybe that series goes 6 or 7.
I think so. I think that there's a real legitimate case to be made that a real team, if they play the Bulls, for example, I think that goes six games. I really do. I think that's there's more to throw at them. And while the Bulls ended up being a bit of a toothless tiger in the end, I think that would have been the type of player, the type of series, with multiple aspects, multiple players to guard and to be concerned with, that I think would have given Cleveland a bit part of a run. I don't think Indiana had enough in the tank. And so, you look at what Toronto can do, and ultimately they showed quite a bit. I think that perhaps Kyle Lowry's starting to get back to where he was. I still don't think he's where he was pre-All-Star break or before, the injury, but I think that he's getting closer. I just don't know if they have enough. They don't have that guy really who can guard LeBron. I don't think that PJ Tucker is the answer there. I don't think DeMar Carroll is the answer there. That's their Achilles heel.
Why would they throw Ibaka at him? You know what I mean? Like, why not throw Ibaka at him?
Yeah, well, I think if you go small, you're gonna need to put him on Love or put him, if you're big though and you got Valanciunas in there, maybe. Although I will say when they were closing out Milwaukee the other night, they were running a Patrick Patterson, Ibaka, PJ Tucker lineup with DeMar DeRozan and Lowry. So it could be you end up just going with 3 really good sized forwards and then put Ibaka on him. I don't know.
And use your fouls on LeBron. He's gonna finish anyway.
Yeah.
So just use them. I don't know why people don't use their fouls on LeBron. It's almost like they're afraid to give him a hard foul, but they should bully his ass. They should absolutely bully him, because if you don't and he's coming hard through the paint, that ball is going down, and it's probably going to be an and one because of your Sally ass foul. You have to go hard at him. That might be a look that they could utilize. I don't know why the teams in the NBA don't use hard fouls, especially the Celtics with the depth that they have. Somebody like Jaylen Brown could give him a good, and I get it. You don't want to be in the plus, and it's a non-shooting foul, and the next thing you know, they go to the line, and I get that statistically, but I just think for certain players, and LeBron is definitely one of them, and maybe John Wall is one too, having Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown using their fouls to bully those players up a little bit and keep them from like really opening the game up and getting ahead of steam, I think there's some value in that. So who knows? Maybe Toronto will make that kind of an adjustment. We've got to wrap the show here, but we can't do it without, well, first off, Celtics will get Monday off, and then they'll be back at it at 8 o'clock Tuesday night for Game 2 on TNT. But Paul Pierce, his season and career ends after a loss to the Utah Jazz. I love the stat that's going out there that Doc Rivers left Boston, and in that 4-year span, the Celtics may go farther this postseason than he's been able to take the Clippers during his entire reign. That's a really interesting stat, and I'm more of a Doc apologist, where you're more of a pile on and, slam on him, but that organization's got it's time. It's TNT. It's dynamite. Throw the switch. They're blowing it up. and they're going to blow some of it up. They have to at this point, and I'd be surprised if Doc's still with the organization next season. I think a lot of changes coming from the Clippers. Maybe the Celtics benefit from that. Maybe they don't. In the meantime, though, I think they treated Paul right. You know, they made sure that they got home to LA, right? That was a big thing that they wanted to do. So, you know, they treated Paul well, and it's his home. Englewood is home, and I know he has great respect for Boston. I'm not going to go on some long diatribe because his last game in Boston, the way that went down was very sentimental. I definitely got choked up when he hit his final shot. It was just a great honor for the way that last game in Boston got to be. But at the same time, I think we just have to put that final thank you to the truth, because we have banner number 17 to thank. There was a time when he didn't want to be in Boston and he wanted to trade and to go and chase a championship, and Danny made it happen for him here. And there's going to be, I think I saw one person on Twitter said it probably the best, that someday his kids are going to grow up and they're going to be disappointed they didn't get to watch his entire career. And he was a unique player with a unique skill set, and he was very entertaining from the Antoine Walker. And, you know, they shot that duo shot 3-pointers like today's NBA when it wasn't yet, you know, in vogue. And Paul was just such a captivating player, a captivating person. And even though he did spell Rick Pitino wrong in his goodbye tweet, I still love him.
He misspelled a lot. You know,
he did.
Paul does not have autocorrect on his phone, so that we know. And he also doesn't know how to find his emojis, as we also know. But, you know, we can forgive that for the fact that he's Paul Pierce. He's the truth, the captain and the truth. I watched the game Friday night. I stayed up specifically because, look, I'm not gonna miss Paul Pierce's last game as a pro. And I was rooting like hell to hope that they'd win, because I really wanted to, you know, I wanted him to keep going. I wanted to play forever, you know, knowing it's gonna come to an end at some point. But somehow they pulled that game out on Friday night against you know, the Jazz, push it to Game 7, and you know, you never know. You know, you hope that, you know, you kind of think back to the Red Sox in 2004, and like, you know, hey, you get Pedro, you get, you know, Schilling, and then who knows what happens in Game 7. And that's what I was kind of hoping. Who knows, something crazy happens. Well, unfortunately, what happened is the Clippers realized nobody can score, and that was it. It was over. They were done. And clearly, as a franchise, that iteration of the Clippers should be done, because it's just not working for that group. But at the end of that all, it's Paul Pierce is walking away. He's the only certainty in Clipperland that we know isn't going to be there. And for whatever it was in the end, and Doc's there, it's about his time in Boston. And that's what this whole thing is about. I watched every tribute, every tweet. I wore out the like button on my Twitter feed of all the stuff that people were writing about Paul after that game, you know, today, after the loss. The Players Tribune put together an outstanding video of, you know, other players, other greats, Kobe, KG, David Ortiz, Donnie Wahlberg. I mean, just people from all over the NBA, all over Boston, I mean, everything. And just kind of remembrance of the guy and the player that he was. He's a great player. He went through some really hard times in Boston, some of which we talked about here on the show. A lot of criticisms here on this show of Paul Pierce, and some really lean times, and advocating, you know, whether he should be traded to blow it up. And ultimately, Danny was able to make that magical trade happen, made that magical season happen. And we had some great times with Paul Pierce here. I'm going to miss him like hell. He was a hell of a player. And, you know, there's going to be another Paul Pierce. I remember from the Larry Bird night in 92, 93, when they had, you know, Magic comes in, and he's wearing the Laker thing, and they pull it off. He's got the Celtics t-shirt underneath, and he says that, Larry, you always going to say there's going to be another Larry Bird. He says there's never, ever, ever going to be another Larry Bird. And I feel the same way about Paul Pierce. There is never, ever, ever going to be another Paul Pierce. He is a unique player. You can go through the draft guides and say, oh, this guy's like Paul Pierce. No. There will never be another like that guy. He is an original, and like you, I'm going to be sad to see him go, but glad for the times we had with him here. I just wish he could have knocked the Jazz out, because I think that really would have helped our chances of getting Hayward.
Yeah, no doubt.
That's the one thing I kind of, like, oh, Paul, you could have helped us one last time. But hey, that's all right. It's he had a hell of a good run and certainly did what he can.
Yeah, you almost wonder if there isn't a home in the Celtics organization for Paul in some sort of a role. Maybe not the Leon Poe role, but you wonder if maybe he doesn't, he's often alluded to coming back to Boston and his relationship with Danny and maybe trying to be involved in whatever capacity. I don't know, but we'll see. That's going to do it for this week, though. The broadcast will be available on demand on the CLNS Radio mobile app as well as clnsradio.com. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at CSL_Justin and at CSL_Duke. Thanks to everybody for tuning in, and you can support the show by subscribing to Celtic Stuff Live on iTunes and Stitcher. Don't forget to give us a rating and a review on the show, because your feedback is important to us. And a reminder, today's show was brought to you by Blue Apron and SeatGeek. They have a great deal for all of you listeners, but most importantly, you would be supporting our show and the CLNS Radio Network. A big thanks to the loyal audience who makes this all worthwhile for John and I, and for staff writer Samuel Elias, executive producer Larry H. Russell, the founder of CLNS Radio Nick Gelso, and my co-host John Duke. I'm Justin Poulin. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Celtic Stuff Live.
Celtic Stuff Live.